Ladies and gentlemen, in all of our lifetimes, we end up saying at least one thing that we regret. And in my last review, I said that if you try to take the gyro on this controller and play in a super competitive, high ranked lobby in a game like Counter Strike or Apex Legends or Rainbow Six Siege or Call of Duty, even, you're going to get shit on if you try to use this controller. Now, like a lot of things in life, the absolute truth is very complex and nuanced. And I thought I explained a lot of these complexities and nuances when I demonstrated this controller performing similarly to the Alpaca in a non-precision aim test. Because the truth is, for most people, this controller is going to suit your needs the best. And I brought in a couple of these third-party controllers to demonstrate that fact. I got the Horipad and the Gamesir Tarantula. And I will also mention that a lot of beast-ass players in the gyro community use this controller as their controller of choice. So what's really going on here? Let's dive into it. On screen is a gameplay by the user GetDunked. This guy is incredibly good, and it's great to have people in the gyro community of this caliber demonstrating what is theoretically possible. In my last video, I mentioned hyper-competitive sweaty shooters like Counter-Strike and Rainbow Six Siege. In my honest opinion, this shooter, Quake Champions, takes the cake for the most competitive shooter out there, or at least the one with the fiercest players you would ever encounter in an average lobby. This game is so sweaty that the skill-based matchmaking system is no longer able to function, as there's only a small player base of hardcore Quake veterans left, and many of them have been playing these arena shooters for decades. In this gameplay, Dunked pulls off over a 2 KD and wins a free-for-all with the PS5 Dualsense controller, which is an impressive feat considering that he is playing at a precision aim disadvantage, as demonstrated in my last review comparing the Alpaca. Now here's where the nuance comes in. Notice him using the lightning gun and rocket launcher throughout most of this gameplay, but he does pull off some nice shots with the railgun in a few spots. Gyro does have a tracking advantage over mouse and keyboard, but it is at a disadvantage at range on crit-based weapons. This is true even on the Alpaca probably. The Alpaca, though, manages to close that gap as much as possible with a sensor up to par with modern mouse hardware, while the DualSense sensor still lags a bit behind. Think of it like using a mouse with an outdated sensor from a while ago, while the Alpaca is like current mouse tech, barring inherent properties both good and bad of using a free-floating mouse. Using a third-party controller like the Tarantula and especially the Horipad is the equivalent of like using a trackball mouse, in my honest opinion. An extremely skilled player can still beat people with that, but that's only because he or she has a high enough skill gap to overcome a sizable handicap. The DualSense is good enough that if you lean into where the gyro has the advantage, which is tracking, especially at close to mid-range, and stay away from where it's weak, which is precision aim at long range, you will do fine with the DualSense controller at virtually any level you play at, as long as you possess the skill to play there. It's just if you try to use the DualSense in a low time to kill tactical shooter that emphasizes headshots at range, you have to accept, if you use the DualSense, that you are going in there with a slight disadvantage against players using modern gaming mice against you. And if you choose to use the DualSense over the Alpaca knowing that anyway for comfort reasons, that's perfectly understandable. A controller is more than this its ability to hit targets in some aim trainer scenario. It's also about how well it functions as a controller, and the Dualsense offers a great balance of both. Okay, so now for the test results. First up is the Horipad. Over 10 trials and 6 shot, my average on this controller was 50,577, and on screen is my highest score at 55,509. In my testing, the gyro on the Horipad felt terrible and unresponsive. I have no idea what's going on with this controller, but what I saw in Steam input calibration was a massive amount of gyro drift. I added some low pass filtering to counter this drift, which made it perform less terrible than it otherwise would. I also suspect that this controller has relatively high end-to-end latency, which I don't have a good method to test for, but I could feel how slow I needed to be hitting these targets, almost like the controller needed just a fraction of a second longer to catch up each time. Now, the Tarantula. Over 10 trials, my average on this controller in 6 shot was 53,217, and my highest score on screen right now was 59,774. This controller acted responsive like it had relatively low end-to-end latency, but then had crazy amounts of jitter, showing a noisy sensor also prone to drifting off target. I again used a low pass filter or dead zone to counter this, and then added a tiny bit of smoothing, trading latency which the controller could afford to give up, taking away most of that jitter. I also downclocked the controller to 500 Hz using high USBF because the default clock rate added way too much noise to an already noisy sensor. And the controller performed okay. It was only moderately worse than the Dualsense, which is about as much as you can hope for out of a third-party controller. Now going up the gyro hierarchy is the PS5 Dualsense controller, which to no surprise beat these two third-party controllers in my test pretty convincingly. Last time, versus the Alpaca, I used no post-processing effects and got an average score of 54.5K. This time, I added just a tiny bit of smoothing, 3 in rewas, and that brought the average up to 56,967. The PS5 Dualsense overclocked to 500 Hz, and Dualsense Edge when underclocked to 500 Hz simply has the best gyro you can get on a commercially available controller, and there are no third-party or Switch controllers currently that rival what Sony has built here. Keep in mind, with all these tests, I can do many things with post-processing, and the FOV slider and real-world sense and acceleration curve and monitor settings and even the background colors and objects on screen, the Carney rig these results and get scores way higher than this. And for the strafe shot test, I like to use this test as my non-precision aim test because it simulates people strafing back and forth at various distances. The Horipad came in dead last with an average score of 83,835 and a high score of 94,175. Again, I felt a lot of latency with this controller. Maybe it's some other issue like drift, but this is what it felt like to me in the test. Now, the Tarantula. The Tarantula performed decently. It was below the Dualsense, but not by a ton. In the test, the Tarantula averaged 94,861 with a high score of 104,586. The controller felt good until I had to shoot at the smallest and fastest moving targets, and sometimes it struggled just a tiny bit. The noise of the sensor started coming into play as I went through the test. Now the Dualsense performed the best in the non-precision test. I also tested the Alpaca, and again it performed almost exactly the same, only 200 points average above the Dualsense average. My average with the Dualsense over 10 trials was 97,286, with the highest score similar to the last time of 108,523. Just like the last test, when it comes to non-precision aim, the shape and weight balance of the Dualsense was enough to equalize the worst sensor when going up against the Alpaca. As with the mouse, the Alpaca is only better than the Dualsense when going for headshots at range. The Dualsense is still going to give you S-tier gyro performance at close to mid-range that you simply will not get with a third-party controller. Controllers like the Tarantula will get you close, but not quite there. In commercial hardware, the Dualsense gyro is simply the best. Alright, so build quality of the PS5 Dualsense, the Gamesir Tarantula, and the Steam Horipad. Okay, starting with the Steam Horipad, as you can see, it has very cheap build quality. In fact, it reminds me a lot of the PowerA controllers. And in fact, I have a PowerA controller right here that, in my opinion, looks almost exactly like it. If I can get both of them in the shot here. See, they have a very similar design, and they also have a very similar feel. The buttons are really cheap feeling, very sloppy, and have a lot of play to them. I don't know if you can see that. The joysticks also feel like they're made out of cheap plastic. The spring tension feels fine, but they're not that great. And in fact, I'll compare it with the Gamesir Tarantula. It feels a lot better. This D-pad here is just completely useless. I mean, you get almost no response whatsoever. It's so stiff. It's just terrible. And then, like, the bumpers, very sloppy. Right there, that trigger, also very sloppy. And from my experience, these controllers like this typically only last about 3 or 4 months before either the bumper on it will snap and it'll just be rattling around, or the sticks will just get massive amounts of stick drift, so it'll just be so sloppy that you'll barely even be able to use it. You know. And I brought a PowerA controller here to compare. I mean, it looks just like it. I mean, the joysticks are just a similar feel. The buttons are sloppy and have a lot of play to them, and you get these very cheap bumpers on top that tend to break after enough use. Now, I was very surprised, though, by the Gamesir Tarantula. Now, the Gamesir Tarantula, it's kind of hard to notice, but the sticks are slightly taller than all 3 of these other controllers that I have on the table. And that actually gives you a decent advantage if you're using the stick, you know, regarding leverage. The sticks also have nice spring tension. They feel almost like the Xbox 360 controller. They have, you know, and I think, and this is a great controller in my opinion if you're a stick player. Like, these sticks are actually Hall effect sticks. So they're not going to get stick drift in like 3 or 4 months, like some of these other controllers. In fact, even the Dualsense has that problem. They sell the Dualsense Edge with the replaceable joysticks because they know that those joysticks are not going to last that long, and you're going to have to end up replacing them. So it's almost like selling like disposable razors. But here you don't have that problem. These Hall effect joysticks are probably going to last you a long time. And these bumpers don't feel cheap either. It feels like these bumpers will last you quite a while. These buttons are pretty responsive. They're not super mushy. And then this D-pad. Oh yeah. That feels good right there. That's what you want to have in a D-pad. That nice clicky tactical response. It's great. And then you look at the bumpers and the triggers here. That's nice. Clicky, clicky. And then check this out. Get that nice hair trigger. And this is a controller that's only $60 or $70, and you get all these features that would be on a pro controller. You even get, check this out, back buttons, and they're in the exact right spot too. Right here, where your middle finger is gonna go, it's right there, and it's very responsive, feels nice. This is a very well built controller, and especially if you're a stick player, this is worth it for the price, for sure. You get all the features of a $200 pro controller in a $60 or $70 controller, and you even get these extra buttons. They're also responsive and in the right place. So you get 4 extra buttons if you need to like assign different, things to like different abilities or different weapons or different items in a game. Yeah, that's nice. The only thing bad about this controller is that the gyro is not quite as good. And I showed that in the test earlier. So here's what it's competing against. The PS5 Dualsense. And the PS5 Dualsense on build quality is no slouch. The only real problem is that you do not get Hall effect joysticks. So like I said, these joysticks tend to wear out depending on how much you use them. I mean, you do have an advantage when you're talking about using it for gyro, because you're not going to be using these sticks that much, so they're not going to wear out as quickly. But it's just the internal components, those little bushings inside there, they just tend to wear out over time. And the buttons are not quite as responsive. It's okay. You get a little bit of mushiness there, but, they're decent. The D-pad is also pretty decent. It's not as good as the Tarantula, but it's very serviceable. I like it. These little 2 top buttons here for the start and select are terrible. I mean, they're so microscopic. Why can't they make them a little bit bigger? Now, I will say the one thing that the DualSense does have, 2 features that it has. Well, actually, there's 3 features. For one, you get a touchpad that you don't get with the Tarantula, and if you use ratcheting with gyro, that touchpad can be very useful because you can rig up a touchpad kind of like the Alpaca, where if you like that thing where you touch your finger here and that activates the gyro, and you lift up your finger and that deactivates it, you can jimmy rig some conductive tape from this touchpad to here, or you can rig it up here if you like, or anywhere else. And I'll show some pictures of those mods. Why not? Now, I'll put it up on screen. There you go. Okay, now, another thing that it has that the Tarantula doesn't have a nice feature actually, is that it has a built-in microphone, and it also has a little bitty built-in speaker. And that could be nice if you like to communicate, with your buddies in like a hero shooter or some kind of team-based game. I mean, it doesn't look like you get a microphone jack on this one. There's nothing there. So see, on this controller, you have your 3.5 jack there to hook up your headset. You don't get that on this controller, and you don't get that on this controller either. So you have to hook up some kind of headset either to directly to your PC or your console, which is annoying. And so yeah, that is a great convenience if you want to speak on a headset. On the PS5 controller, you also get haptic feedback triggers. And what that means is that like if you're playing a racing game or something like that, and you press this trigger in for the gas, it'll give you a little bit of feedback, a little bit of tension, so you have that responsiveness, so you know how much you're pushing that gas pedal in, or on the other side, your brake pedal. You know how much you're pushing your brake pedal in. That can add some immersiveness to some single-player games as well. I don't particularly care about it. The one thing the one reason I would care about it for gyro is that it can work sort of like a hair trigger. I mean, you don't get a ton of tension with it. I mean, when you try to use when you use it on max firmness, it'll push down about this much, and it'll offer you a little bit of resistance. You can still keep pushing it down, but it'll resist. I mean, but from my experience, even if you do that, you're still better served probably using these bumpers here. That's what I use to shoot. And like I showed you in the Alpaca video, these bumpers are pretty responsive. I think they're pretty good. So, oh, and by the way, one thing I will mention about the DualSense as well is that it has, you know, a little bit of texturing here on the handles, which is nice because if it didn't have that, it's slick on the other side. So, you know, it tends to be a little bit slick when you really get sweaty in a competitive shooter. You know, it's going to slide there, but you have a little bit of texture there for a little bit of grip. And I'll show a mod to help with that here in a minute. The Tarantula also has that little bit of texturing. If you can see it, it's very hard to see. And that's nice going through the handle. Again, the handle's a little bit different shape, and I think it holds a little bit better. And it also has a little bit of texture around the stick, and that's also really nice. So yeah, as far as build quality goes, I mean, this controller has amazing build quality. This controller has good build quality, very acceptable. And then this controller, yeah. So, mods for the PS5 controller. As I said before, the PS5 controller has these slip and slide handles, at least on the front part of it. And I've also heard complaints that these handles are a little bit too thin. So, this company called Control Freak, I'm sure you heard of them, have these performance grips that you can put on the controller to add a little bit of width and also some grip. And I also have here these generic Control Freaks that you can put on the thumbsticks of the controller to make the right joystick a little taller and also add a little bit more grip to your left joystick. So I'll demonstrate here how to apply this. I already applied the grip, as you can see, to the other side. It's a little bit tricky and you only get one shot at it. So you have to be kind of precise about how you put this on here. So it just peels off of this film. And then you got to apply it pretty much on the edge here and towards the top of the buttons. So you start with that. And you got to be very careful because otherwise you can get wrinkles on this very easily. So, like I said, you only get one shot. Do not miss a chance to blow. This opportunity only comes once in a lifetime. All right, let's see here. Kind of work that around there as carefully as I can. Like I said, once that sticks on there, boy, you're screwed if it's not on the right spot. And I think I got it like exactly perfect, man. All right, so this kind of work this little wing. They have it like such in a weird pattern. Let's see here. I think I got it just right. Oh, you don't want it to wrinkle. I seen another review where another guy got his kind of a little bit wrinkled. It's like there was just nothing he could do. Yeah, once you press that down, boy, that's where that's going. You best believe it. I got it just a tiny little bit off on the other side, and I couldn't peel it back. It'll peel in half before you manage to peel it off. Ooh, it's one the wrinkle right there. I think I got it. Yep, perfect. Gotta be careful how you stick it on, but yeah. Oh yeah, that feels a lot better. You got more grip when you're trying to... You got more grip underneath here, especially. Okay. So that makes it look nicer. That gives it that premium look too, to make it look like kind of like the DualSense Edge. See, you're getting basically a $200 controller by just paying $15 for like one of these little mods. Okay. So then you got your Control Freak, and everybody's seen these before. I prefer the generic ones personally. I've used a ton of them. But yeah, it helps to have more leverage on that right stick. When that right stick is taller, you can be, you know, more precise with that joystick. And when you're like me and you're using the joystick plus gyro at the same time, sometimes you got to use the joystick and gyro at the same time to hit somebody who's circling around your character, and you're trying to track them the entire time as they're circling you. So sometimes I need a little bit more precision out of this right stick. So this little cap here should help. I can actually manage to get it all the way on there. There we go, it's starting to get on. It's all the way on there. And there you got a little bit of leverage. Now for this particular one, it might be annoying to have it, see it's kind of hitting on the side there. I'm not sure if I want that. Here, I'll apply the other one. On the other side, just to make it kind of look uniform. So there you go. You got your grip handles, and then you got your control freaks. And that's two little mods that you can do. And like I mentioned before though, you can also do the conductive tape mod to make it where this center part right here works as a touchpad to activate your gyro if you like to do ratcheting. And I'll show a couple pictures of that right now. Okay, so there you go. So you can do that mod too by running that conductive tape from here to here, or from the touchpad to here if you desire. And if you feel, you know, a little frisky and want to take the whole thing apart, you can even run the conductive tape from underneath the touchpad and run it to wherever you would like to have your touch sensor at. So yeah, there's just a couple things that you can do to, you know, improve the PS5 controller. As for the price, first up is the Horipad, coming in at $60, which just isn't worth the price given the cheap build quality, mid-gyro functionality, and limited features. At best, I think this controller should be worth about $40, on par with something like the PowerA Spectra. Now, the Gamesir Tarantula. This controller offers a very impressive mix of build quality and pro controller features, with the patented TMR sticks that combine the benefits of Alps and Halo Effects joysticks, which is great for stick players. Sure, it's only usable on mobile, PC, or Switch, and that's literally the only reason why you would choose something like the Nacon Revolution 5 Pro over this. Otherwise, this controller is a steal for $70 if you are willing to sacrifice some gyro performance to get those pro controller features. And last but not least is the Dualsense, pricing it at $75 new and at around $55 open box, as I mentioned in my last video. It offers the best gyro performance you can get on a commercially made controller, with a good amount of features like adaptive triggers, a touchpad, and a 3.5mm headphone and mic jack. The only issue is the Alps joysticks on this controller tend to wear out in about 7 months, as they are only rated for so many cycles. I will mention you can buy the Dualsense Edge, which has the exact same gyro performance and battery life as the stock Dualsense and has replaceable joysticks. The catch is the replacements are $20 each and the controller is $200. So unless you absolutely must have back buttons on the Dualsense, I'd avoid this controller. The PS5 Dualsense, in my honest opinion, is great value, even if they tend to wear out over time. Keep in mind, even if sticks do not wear out as fast on other controllers, there's still other parts on all these controllers rated for so many cycles, like the bumpers and face buttons, and I've broke the bumpers off numerous controllers. So there is no controller you can buy that will last a lifetime. They all eventually have to be replaced. Okay, so the PS5 DualSense controller, should you buy it? Absolutely. You will not find better gyro performance on a commercially available controller. The only controller that has better gyro performance than this is the Alpaca, and that comes with its own set of issues, as I outlined in my last review. Now, I will say this, the Gamesir Tarantula I was very impressed by. It only offered slightly worse gyro performance than the DualSense, but came pack loaded with features, had great build quality, and was at a price point of only $70. So you have a controller that has all the features of a Pro controller for about a third of the price. So yeah, I was very impressed by this controller and I would recommend getting it. One of the only issues with the Gamesir Tarantula is that the only platforms that it works on is the PC and Switch. So if you're looking for a controller for the Switch, I would highly recommend picking this up. Now, just to clarify, the gyro hierarchy, okay, for performance. The Alpaca is S tier. It's at the very top. The DualSense and DualSense Edge, clocked to 500 Hz, is in A tier. Controllers like the Nacon Rev 5 Pro and Gamesir Tarantula are in B tier for gyro performance. Controllers like the Horipad are in C tier. And then controllers like this Nintendo PowerA Switch controller are at the bottom with barely usable gyro that is not going to be ideal. So that this clarifies. Now, the gyro sensor in the DualSense controller is slightly worse than a modern gaming mouse when it comes to going for precision headshots at range. So if you go against a mouse player on a modern gaming mouse from, longer ranges and you're going for headshots, this controller is not going to be quite as good. So if you're playing against somebody who's really good, you're going to have to overcome that gap with skill. But if you fight an opponent tracking at mid to close range with this controller, you're actually going to be at a slight advantage. So when you play with the DualSense controller competitively, you have to be aware of how your engagements are being staged when you play with this controller. If you know where the controller is good and where it's not, you can probably compete even at a very high level with the DualSense controller. So I just like to clarify, the complexities and nuances that I covered in this video. And I just like to say that these videos take a lot of time and effort to make. And if you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. Peace out.